So now we're going to talk about how we flex a spec, i.e. we're talking to a client over the phone or at a client visit and we find out that they are actively hiring. And what we're trying to do at this point is take from what they think they want to hire to expanding the flexibility of that as much as possible and giving us as much control as we can possibly get over finding a candidate that can fulfill their requirements. We're going to take them through a journey of explaining what they're looking for whilst pushing the boundaries of the skill set as minimal as possible and the compensation or the day rate that we can get for the contractor as high as possible. Start point on that is to figure out what is the urgency around the role or what's the reason for the hire. And we're trying to establish here how much pain there is associated with not filling the role and what's already been done to fill the opportunity. So we're going to take them through a series of questions that help us to figure out where are they currently at and what happens if they don't fill the role. So first of all, we're going to ask them, what have you done about the opportunity so far and how did it come about? So once we've talked them through how did it come about, we know, is it an internal move, has somebody left, has somebody been promoted, and where is the gap? Once we've understood where that gap is, we can take them through a series of questions that enable us to understand what happens if the gap isn't filled. And this also gives us an indication of how hard we should work on filling the vacancy and if it's a priority. So we're going to want to ask, how long have you got before you desperately need someone in the slot? What's the impact of not having someone in this role? Is it a financial impact? Is it a time impact? And who takes the burden of the person not being in the role? And what we're trying to understand here is if the individual that's responsible for the hiring is taking the burden and all the financial impact. Ideally, where there is a need that causes some sort of pain to the hiring manager, we know this is a role that's going to be prioritised and urgently filled. If the hiring manager would like to hire someone, but they're not going to feel any sense of urgency or need to do it, it becomes less of a priority for us to fill the role. And also how we approach selling what we're going to do to fill that role and pushing for exclusivity and various other things that you'll see at the end of the process will change dependent on the answers to what is the urgency and what is the need. Something that it might be wise for us to do at this point, if the client is explaining that they have a real need but seems to be lacking urgency around the hire, is to talk through what the necessary timeline is and see if they understand how long it's going to take, and we can increase then not just the need but the urgency to get moving now. So a lot of clients will say, oh, it's okay, I've got someone here for a month, so we can take our time over the process. However, what we need to do is to bring the timeline forward, and for us to stay in control of the recruitment process, we need to lay out how long it's going to take to get someone on board. So we need to explain to them, well, it's going to take us maybe a couple of weeks to source the skill set, and then there's your interview process. In order for you to find the person that you're 100% comfortable with, that's probably going to take 3 to 4 weeks, so we're at 6 weeks now anyway. So if you wanted a handover at all, we're now 2 weeks past the point that the person leaves. And then we've got to get that person possibly to resign from their current job. It could be a week. If it's in the US, in the UK, it's going to be a minimum month, up to 3 months. So the point that the client starts talking about they have a need and they're going to start to feel some pain at some point if there isn't someone in that job, we need to increase the urgency by ensuring that they understand the timelines for the hire. We can also at that point make sure that there's nothing that's going to stop the hire. So they've got sign-off, they've got the budget in place, and all the people that are going to be required to make the decision are in place and aren't going on holiday or aren't also leaving. Nothing is going to stop the hire from moving forward. This is important when you start to look at prioritising your time to figure out which roles should I be working on. If you have the client contact and can get this information, it can make sure that you're focusing your time and effort and energy on places where you know there is a real urgent need and there's an understanding of the timelines required to hire. So keep all your processes tight and make sure that you're able to bill more frequently. Then we need to find out what have they done to fill the role already. So first thing we need to understand is, have they looked internally to fill the role? This is important because a lot of times you'll find that clients want to see externally what's available to compare against an internal candidate they already have. really, really good companies are going to be looking at succession planning all the time, and they'll be looking to move someone up into the role. The only thing that will stop them doing that is if they haven't got enough strength in depth to use a more junior person to succeed into the role, or if they can find someone externally that is a much better candidate, and they'll benchmark their internal candidates against that. And you have to be wary if this is what they're doing, and the urgency to fill the role may be there, but the urgency to pay a fee may not be. So you could be providing a service that gives them a quality control against their internal candidates for free, because they're not going to pay a recruitment fee to us for someone externally if they have an equal or close to equal candidate internally. And what that will do is push the requirements down the food chain. There'll still be a hire and a need in the company somewhere, but it's likely to get more junior if they got a succession planning, or it'll be a completely different skill set if someone's making a lateral or an international move. So have they looked internally to fill the role, and what stage are they at with that? If we've established they've got sign-off to go externally for the role, that's great, but also have they got an internal team working on it? And how many other recruitment consultancies have they spoken to about filling the role? What is our competition here? Can we push for a period of exclusivity at the end of the process, or is it already out on the market? Are we getting the role ahead of the market? Are we getting the role behind the market? Where are we at, and what have they done already to fill the position? Again, this is important to know how much effort you should put into the role. At the end of this process of flexing the spec, how hard can we push for things like exclusivity? And also, when you're looking at working this opportunity versus a number of others you've got on the go, what is the percentage chance of you filling the role? And that can largely be determined by what competition you have and how much of a head start they may or may not have on the role versus you. So now we're going to get into taking a person spec for the role, and this is where we start to flex things a little bit. So you may well have a written job spec, or a client may say to you, I'll just send you a job spec. Typically, those job specs don't really tell you all the detail you need to fill the role. And if they've sent the same job spec out to each other agency, consultancy that's working the role, or the internal team, and you've got an opportunity to qualify the spec with a client, you're in more control and you can flex the spec. So first of all, we're going to want to find out what are the essential skills required for the candidate in the role, and what are the desired skills. What must they have, and what is it nice for them to have? And what we're going to try and do is minimize the requirements for the desired skills and the essential skills. So if they say, for instance, someone must have Java and C#, what we're going to try and find out is, where does the emphasis need to be? Do they need to be a stronger Java person or a C# person? If you had a really awesome Java person, but they only knew a little bit of C#, would that be okay? So what we're trying to do is really qualify what exactly do they want, and what are they prepared to compromise on. This could be also with the seniority or the level of experience. So they could say, I want someone who's managed a team of 10 people before and has got at least 5 years experience. What you could do there is flex it a little bit and say, well, what if they're a really awesome person who's got 3 years experience but has already managed a team of 10, or they're really awesome, they've got 4 years experience but only managed 5. We're trying to lower the expectations down as much as possible to give us the scope to find the ideal person. So what are the desired skills and what are the essential skills, and where is the compromise? Typically what you'll find with a client when they start a recruitment process is what they're looking for is either the person that has just left the role or has resigned, or person in their mind that's ideal that they clearly can't hire, otherwise they would have done. So they're explaining to you what their ideal is, and that's not going to happen. So we have to start to prepare them in this process for scenarios around what they will be able to get, and lower their expectations on the essential and the desired skills. So we've got to ask them questions like, okay, what if it's a candidate like this, or what if it's a candidate like that? Would you take this one over this one, and try and figure out where are the key essential skills and what are they prepared to compromise on? If they have a laundry list of skills that they're looking for, and this happens quite frequently, they're actually looking for 2 people, we have to try and advise them to break that down and figure out what is the priority and what do they need to hire, and what other skill sets could be covered internally in the team. Now, still on the person spec, what we're looking to establish is, what can we find out here that we wouldn't find on a job spec? So whilst we've got the line manager there, we're going to find out what are the qualities of the team that the person is going to sit in and work with or manage, and therefore what do their skills have and what are they missing that it would be helpful if this candidate had. What this will also give us is an idea of the background and the skills in the team and enable us to match a candidate up with it a little bit better. And it'll give us control over the information flow that other recruiters that we're competing with don't have. And we can also try and find out at this point about the line manager that they're going to report into, what skills do they have or are they light on that it would also enhance if this individual had. What we can then start to do is look at what are the key skills for the role, but what is it helpful to have in the team, and we can use that as a selling point for the candidate when we're positioning candidates as an opportunity for the role. Now we're also going to go through the actual job description here. Again, the client may say, well, I'll send you the job spec. Don't worry about that. What we're trying to find out is information that isn't available on the job spec. So we can help sell this to candidates, and again, we can do a better job than other agencies or the internal recruiters. You may find that you speak to candidates that have already been approached by another consultancy or the internal recruiters, and they have rejected the opportunity. This is where we have to have information that enables us to sell better than our competitors and the internal team. So if we know, for instance, what the scope of the role is, how this project strategically impacts the business, what the reporting line and exposure to senior management is, what the succession planning is for the person they're reporting into, and where this job could go, that gives us an advantage compared to other consultants in the internal team. What we might also want to find out is how is the person going to be defined as a success in their first 6 to 12 months, and this enables us to really qualify the candidates. And also, when is their performance going to be assessed? So we might have an opportunity here to say to a candidate, you're coming in at this level on this compensation, but they'll assess your performance in line with the annual appraisal. So you're 6 months away from being appraised, at which point you might be viable for a promotion or an additional bonus. This enables us to get the compensation opportunity up a little bit because they can move up a pay grade or get a bonus that they wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. So knowing that information again gives us an advantage to sell against that competition. Finally, while we're on the job description, we need to ask the hiring manager how they would sell the opportunity. This helps us two ways. We are able to then translate that information to the candidate pool and sell the opportunity in the same way as the client. But we also understand what that client is going to do when the candidate goes to interview, giving us a bit more control over the process. We can also then match that up with candidates' expectations and aspirations. So if we know how the client intends to sell the role, we can find candidates who want not just that opportunity today, but whatever the client will sell for the future. We're also going to try and find out here why the client joined the company and why they enjoy their job and the role as it is at the moment. This is something that you won't find on the spec, and again helps us to build a better relationship with the candidate and prepare them for interview and find ways where there's common ground between the candidate and the client. It gives us a lot more control over the process if we have this information versus what you'll see on a job spec. That won't never be on a job spec. Now we're going to talk about the compensation package, or the day rate or hourly rate. What you're trying to find out here is what are the limits of the range and how far you can push. Let's talk about a permanent opportunity first. It's a little bit more complex than a contract opportunity. What you want to find out is what is the top end of the range for the ideal candidate. So let's imagine that they hired the person that is their dream fit for the role. What is the maximum that they can pay for that opportunity? Now, typically most permanent opportunities are going to fit within a range and a band that that company has for similar types of people of a similar level. When you look at corporate structures, there's normally a banding and they have to fit within that banding. So what we're going to try and find out is what is the upper end of that range. But then salary is only one part of a compensation package for a permanent employee. And we've got to find out what are all the other elements of the package that we could sell to a candidate in this role that could have a monetary or a lifestyle impact, which may have a value for the candidate over and above where they are right now. So if we're still staying in the financial area, what are the potential bonuses or additional financial benefits that could come with a role like this? So some companies will have things like a car allowance, a living allowance, even a clothing allowance in some instances, where there will be cash incentives on top of the base salary. A lot of companies will also have a flexible benefits package, So they will enable a candidate to take a portion of their pension or the cash value of their other benefits and include it on their base salary if they wish. Now, knowing what the range of these things are enables us to play with the salary range a little bit. So for instance, if a salary range went up to 100,000, but there was also a 5,000 car allowance, and there's a 20,000 benefit pot at which you can flex that up and down and say take half as cash. We started out with 100,000 base salary. It's gone up to 105, it's gone up to 115. Now if we're going to the market to find candidates that would take 115 on a base salary, we can start at a base of 100 right now. So we're going to get a better quality candidate than if we go to the market looking for a 100 base salary, because then we've got to start searching for a 90 or 85 base salary now to give them an uptick. So by having the ability to ask this information, we've pushed the cash boundary up a little bit, so that the pool of candidates that we can search for has increased. Again, we're able to find better candidates than the competition on the market who don't know that information. We're also looking for additional benefits here. What does the company offer that may be valuable to a candidate that isn't included in the headline-based salary? Now, some of these may have financial benefits like travel allowance, for instance. If a company will pay a travel allowance for a candidate who lives out of town to come into town, that'll save them a lot of money in a year. And if you look at it from a gross salary perspective, if a company will pay £2,000 or $2,000 for someone's travel expenses, then that's £4,000 to £5,000 off their gross if they're an upper end taxpayer. So we've gained back $5,000 or pounds off of the total comp required for the candidate if they don't currently get travel at the moment, but they will get their travel paid for by the company. So again, in the same ratio that we're looking at previously, we're up to 120 gross now. If the candidate's total spend on travel is $2,500, we've moved the comp up again. It's not going to be paid in cash, but the $5,000 difference we paid in savings off the gross. It still equates to the same thing. So we've got more to play with. Again, there may be additional benefits. So they could be flexible working. They could work, come in later or leave earlier, or work one day from home. There could be any number of advantages. They might have a parking space so they could drive to work. We need to know what is the total package and how can we use elements of that to sell to different candidates given what their motivations and drivers are. If you're just going to market knowing the salary and that's all, you're missing a huge amount of potential pool of candidates and potential different levers that you can pull to influence people to want the job. Not everybody that we deal with is super ambitious and wants a 20% uptick on their compensation. A number of people will be at a stage in their life where they're looking for something different, not just on the role that they're looking for, but on the way that opportunity is packaged. If we know what all the different levers are, we can pull different kind of candidates. People will sometimes take a pay cut. If the commute is easier, they have flexible time, they can spend more time with their family, there's still some bonus potential. Whatever the scenario is, you can move people for different reasons other than cash. So knowing all the details enables us to have more levers to pull on. With a contract job, it's pretty cut and dry. So there are no benefits with a contractor, it's a day rate. So what we're looking at here, or an hourly rate, is how we can get the client to compromise. So what is the maximum day rate they will go to, and how can we get them to compromise on the skill set to get to that day rate? So here we're looking at what's going to cause problems if we go over that, what's the boundaries of the budget, what's their ideal amount, what's the maximum they'll go for, and we're going to try and push it as much as we can. And once they've given us that maximum, we're then going to try and push it a little bit more and say, so if we get the absolute perfect candidate and it will cost you $50 or £50 a day more, or $10 an hour more, would you go to that? So we're going to keep trying to push it a little bit. That way we know, again, we've got the maximum pool we can go to, but there is less flexibility around benefits here, as there is with the permanent roles, to be more creative with the pool of candidates you source. You just got to push hard on the cash, and that conversation is probably going to be quite a bit shorter. We've also got an opportunity now to find out much more detail from the line manager about the interview process. If you refer back to the interview prep and debrief questions that we were running through earlier on, you can get a lot of that information now. So we're going to want to know who is involved in the interview process. What's their background? What did they want from the role? What is the interview process? Is the candidate coming for a technical test first, a chronological interview? Are you going to talk through their CV? Is it formal? Is it informal? What do you expect them to wear? How quick is the interview process? And can we bring that timeline forward? If you find the perfect person, how quickly would you move? All the information that you need to know, down to what questions do you like to ask and what answers would you like to hear, you want to ask at this stage when you're taking the job spec. At this stage, the client understands that your motivation is to find the best possible candidate and execute the process as quickly as you can. They're likely to give you as much information as possible at this stage. If you take down this job spec, go find a candidate and then come back to them and say, oh, by the way, what's the interview process? You're probably going to get less information from them. So if you push for that information at this stage, whilst they're in the mode of giving you as much information as possible, you're likely to get more out of them around all of the elements of the interview process than if you leave it till later. Now we're rounding in on a close now. There's just one more little bit of information that we need to get, which is the future plans of the company or the department in the company. Again, you're not likely to get this on a job spec, and it's information that can help you to sell and also be in more control. So how would the client position the company against the competitors that you're likely to be pulling candidates from, or they may well be interviewing at, in terms of the future possibilities? That's difficult to get off of a website, it's difficult to get from a job spec. That client is going to be able to give you that information. Now we've got an awful lot of information in addition to the job spec, we've got to start to round out on a close a little bit. Now what you're closing on depends on the information that you've been given through that process. Let's assume, for instance, it's an urgent role, you've got ahead of the market, they're not talking to anyone else right now. At that point, we need to explain what we're going to do and also what therefore we need the client to do for us. So in that scenario where it's that urgent, be it a permanent or contract role, and you're ahead of the market, really you want to be pushing for exclusivity on that. So you want to explain to the client what you're going to do now. With this information, you're going to go back to the office, or you're going to start and clear your desk of any other opportunities and focus purely on this one. And you estimate that you're going to call roughly 100 people a day for the next 5 days to try and find a short list of candidates that are appropriate, and you'll be able to contact them back and whatever times are convenient for them over the course of the next week to update them with your progress, and you'll literally boil the ocean to find them their dream candidate. Now, you can only do that if the client is also in return going to agree to some certain terms. So they're going to have to agree that they will immediately respond should you send CVs, or give you 24 hours feedback within 24 hours, and ideally you'll do this for them if they give you exclusivity on the role. Because the most frustrating thing would be if you prioritize them over and above any other client, and 5 days into making 100 calls a day, on your 499th call you find the dream candidate, and some other recruiter randomly stumbled across those after they gave them the spec, having done no work whatsoever, and you're not going to get a fee for that. So given that there's no fee up front because it's contingent recruitment, you want to push for exclusivity. One step further than that would be that you push for a retainer. So if you want to have focused on the role all the way through to completion, looking at no other client, we could do a retainer up front. And therefore they would have total exclusivity, not just of our time, but of all the candidates that we submit. Now retainer selling is a different topic, and we'll come on to that when you're onto consultant and senior consultant training. But you may see opportunities when you're taking down job specs or you're picking up jobs to push for a retainer. If you do, let's give it a go and bring some people along with you to a meeting to discuss it in more detail. The proposals that go into that and the process of doing that is a little bit complicated for someone in the rookie training, but we will look at it later on. You can, however, push for a period of exclusivity. Well, at the worst case scenario here, let's say that they've given the opportunity to a couple of other companies as well, we can still explain to them how hard that we intend to work. A lot of companies don't really understand, and a lot of line managers, what you're going to do to fill the job. And the perception you don't want them falling into is you go back to the office, do a quick search, put an advert out, and you send them anything that comes through, because they can do that themselves. We need to be explaining to them right now what value they're getting for the fee and the effort that we're going to do to try and fill the job for them. And in return, we need to get them to understand that in order to help us to continue to do that, we need feedback. So let's agree we'll send a couple of resumes or CVs as a rangefinder, and we'll do that within an agreed period of time. But they'll give us feedback that's comprehensive on those CVs and direct us what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong. And let's agree the timeline for that, or an agreed check-in point, so we stay in control of the client and we know, is the need really urgent? If we send a CV and it takes them 2 weeks to come back with feedback, probably not. Or there's something else going on. There's an internal candidate, or there's another candidate from another agency. If they commit to giving us feedback in a certain time frame or a check-in point and they stick to it, we know we're in control and we know this is likely to progress through to a positive conclusion. So if you can't get it at exclusivity, what you can get is an agreed working relationship with a client where each time you're doing something for them, they're also committing to something for you. That way you stay in control and you know it's worth working. Finally, you come to the end of this whole process, and this client now believes that you're going to do everything in your power humanly possible to fill their role. You're the next best recruiter they're ever going to deal with, and you're the one that's going to change their perspective on dealing with recruiters forever. So we need to ask, who else could we help? So let's assume we're going to do really well in this role. Are there any colleagues in this company that you feel we could also help, or one of my colleagues could help out as well in a different vertical market? This is a great opportunity to use for business development. You've sold exactly what you're going to do, and whether you deliver it on it or not, this is an opportunity to introduce more people to the business or penetrate further into the company. Obviously, we hope we're going to do very well on this, and we're going to do everything we can to do that. And if we are doing well on it and we're delivering as we've agreed, there'll be more opportunities to push for introductions elsewhere as well. But this is a great point for which you could cross-sell either your colleagues' work and verticals or yourself further into the business. It's the same as asking referrals after you've briefed a candidate on an interview. If they can't think of anything right now, you know, say, don't worry, because we're going to be talking a lot. I'm going to be calling you at all the agreed times with progress on the market. So if you do think of anything in the future, you can tell me then. This also lets the client know, okay, this one's not going away. He's going to work his ass off to try and find me someone I'm looking for. The least I can do, if that's relationship is going well, is to reciprocate and introduce him to some other people in this company or elsewhere that he'll be able to do business with.